Okay. Turn to 1 Corinthians 14 and 20. You find these words, brethren, and let me add sistren so that the language is included. Stop thinking like children. In regard to evil, be infants, but in your thinking, be adults. And when it says in regard to evil, be infants, in other words, don't be sophisticated when it comes to being conniving and deceitful and all of that. Don't know so much about all that. But to stop thinking like children, thinking like adults. This workshop was about coming of age, practical wisdom from moving from adolescence to adults. That's the language that Hogan and I talked about. There's some other scriptures I have you put down for future reference. Put down 1 Corinthians 13 and 11. Just write it down. 1 Corinthians 13 and 11. 2 Peter 3, 17 through 18. 2 Peter 3, 17 through 18. Hebrews 6, 1 through 2. Ephesians 4, 13 through 15. And Colossians 1, 9 through 10. Ephesians 4, 13 through 15. Turn to the 1 Corinthians 13 and 11. 1 Corinthians 13 and 11. Just want to get these in your head, then I want to move on with, I think, is a simple but substantive outline. 1 Corinthians 13 and 11. When I was a child, I talked as a child, I thought as a child, I reasoned as a child. When I became a man, ladies, you can insert the word there, woman, I put childish ways behind me. The sense of behavioral psychological rite of passage. Turn to 2 Peter 3, 17 through 18. 2 Peter. Now you know that would have to come after 1 Peter. 3, 17 through 18. Therefore, dear friends, since you already know this, be on your guard so that you may not be carried away by the error of lawless men and fall from your secure position. But grow in grace and in the knowledge of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. To him be glory both now and forever. Amen. The imperative to grow in grace. You're never standing still. You're either shrinking or enlarging. Turn to Hebrews 6, 1 and 2. Therefore, let us leave the elementary teachings about Christ and go on to maturity. Now, you have to learn the elementary teachings of Christ, but don't stay there. How many of you stayed in elementary school and didn't go to high school or college or anything? You just never went past 6th grade. So you went on from some elementary things. All right. Not laying, again, the foundation of repentance from acts that lead to death and faith in God. Okay, now turn to Ephesians 4, 13 through 15. Ephesians 4, 13 through 15. Until we all reach unity in the faith and in the knowledge of the Son of God and become mature, attaining to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ. Then we will no longer be infants, tossed back and forth by the waves and blown here and there by every wind of teaching and by the cunning and craftiness of men in their deceitful scheming. So part of maturity is stability. If you're not grounded in something, you're vulnerable to anything. You've seen people who are members of, who fellowship with 5 or 6 different churches, each with a whole different doctrine, a whole different teaching. They don't know what they believe. They got way too many voices in their head. And then Colossians, 1st chapter, 9th and the 10th verse. For this reason, since the day we heard about you, we have not stopped praying for you and asking God to fill you with knowledge of his wisdom, knowledge of his will through all spiritual wisdom and understanding. Now, practical wisdom for finding self-reliance and dependability. Look at your outline. When you look at Webster's dictionary and it has the definition of adolescence, I want somebody to stand up and read that. Do we have another microphone? Oh, okay. All right. Somebody stand up and read that. Well, not everybody at once. You get ready to read the one on adulthood.
Adolescence, the period following the onset of puberty during which a young person develops from a child into an adult.
Okay, the period following the onset of puberty, so it's post-pubescence, when a young person, somebody say develops. All right, develops from a child into an adult. It doesn't just happen. There has to be some intentionality. Develops from a child into an adulthood. So it's one of the most dynamic transitional periods. Develops, like you develop a career plan, like you develop an intervention plan. Anything developed, you have to have a plan, and then you have to plan it, the work, and then work to plan. All right? And so people who don't have a plan, if there's not a plan, there's some intentionality, they end up being underdeveloped. Underdeveloped. Mm-hmm. All right? If you're 40 years old, still living with your mama, paying your tickets, or bringing your laundry home to do at mama's house, at 40, you are an underdeveloped human being. All right? I would use the word pathetic, but that would be impolite. Now, if you move back into mama at 40 because you take care of mama, that's a dependable human being. But I'm talking about you gotta move in with mama because at 40 you can't take care of yourself. That's pathetic. I'm not talking about if you temporarily lose your job. You know what I'm saying. All right. Now, would you read the description of adulthood? This is just Webster's dictionary. This ain't Braxtonism.
Adulthood. When you stop growing and start shaving, if you're a male.
No, read that. I inserted the if you're a male because Webster wrote this obviously from a male perspective. All right. I'm just assuming most of you ladies in here don't have to shave. I'm talking about your chin. Go ahead.
You are in adulthood, a point where you reach maturity. Unfortunately, physical adulthood does not necessarily imply that psychological adulthood, economical adulthood, or social adulthood is present. Adulthood implies a maturity of sorts, whether it be physical or psychological.
Okay, so when you stop growing and start shaving, that's metaphorical for men, you are an adult, at least physically. You've reached a point of physical maturity. Unfortunately, physical adulthood, i.e. maturity, does not necessarily imply that psychological adulthood, all right, is present. It doesn't mean economic adulthood or social adulthood is present. So you could have reached a point of physical maturity, but in economic terms you lag behind, in social terms you lag behind, psychological terms you lag behind. And in fact, let's just say for the record, physical maturity does come first because you can do that without effort. As long as you eat a minimum of food and water, you are going to reach physical maturity. You may not be in the best shape in the world, but that will just kind of happen on its own if you don't die. But psychological maturity, economic maturity, to be able to take care of yourself and others, social maturity, to be able to live constructively, productively in some way, shape, form, or fashion, that does not just happen. And so when you start talking about coming of age, which was the language we used for this workshop, it's at what point does the rest of you grow up to your physical self? When do you, or to use the term, when do you grow into yourself? There's a lot of people in our society who simply are not growing into themselves. Howard Thurman used the metaphor. He says, we got too many young men in our communities with their pants sagging down, with their hands shoved deep in their pockets, aimlessly wandering through the streets, shoving the doors of life open with a limp shoulder. Know what I'm saying? They haven't grown into themselves. Their life is meandering and pointless. They're living life at the level of what Samuel DeWitt Proctor called glandular activity. And you could, I could find descriptives for an equivalent female of any race or ethnic background, people who beyond physical maturity, the other aspects of life, they have not grown into themselves. Coming of age is a matter of when the rest of us catches up to our physical self. All right? Now, 3 examples of individuals who came of age. And I say, what 3 people would they all know? Since y'all don't know a lot of people that I grew up with, I don't necessarily know everybody you grew up with. So what's a couple of people that we all know? Christina, somebody we all know. Clark Kent, Superman. All right? Superman is a young boy who learns that he has extraordinary powers and is not of this world. As a child and as a youth, he struggles to fit in and has to learn to control his awesome powers. As a young man, he journeys to discover where he came from and what he was sent here to do. But the hero in him must emerge if he is to save the world from annihilation and become the symbol of hope for all humankind. I took this straight off of the internet in terms of how the makers of the movie defined it in Man of Steel. That's Superman, boy from another world who comes of age. Then, of course, there was Simba. The young lion, Simba, is the heir. I put one too many E's in there. I did that in honor of Sarah Palin. Is the heir of his father, Mufasa, king of Pride Rock. Greatest movie of all time. Simba's wicked uncle Scar plots to usurp Mufasa's throne by luring father and son into a stampede of wild beasts. But Simba escapes and only Mufasa is killed. Simba returns as an adult to take back his homeland from Scar with the help of his friends Timon and Pumbaa. How many of you are familiar with Lion King? Those of you who are not are sad individuals. And not to exclude the ladies, there's Mulan. Fearful that her ailing father would be drafted into the Chinese military, Mulan takes his spot. Although as a girl living under a patriarchal regime, she is technically unqualified to serve in the military. She cleverly impersonates a man, goes off to train with fellow recruits, accompanied by her dragon, Mushu, which is played by Eddie Murphy in the movie. She uses her smarts to help ward off a Hun invasion, and in the process of things, she falls in love with the dashing captain along the way. These are 3, if you look at those Disney characters, with the exception of Man of Steel, that they are individuals who came of age. Each one of them had a different journey. I had to understand who they are, what their powers were, develop those powers, and then figure out how their life mattered to others. It was a journey. It was a process. All right? They came of age. They grew into themselves. They caught up to themselves. And there was some fruit, something to show for their living. Each of the 3 preceding characters had to fulfill the quote-unquote task of adolescence before they could come of age. And that's really what I want to say to you today, that adolescence there are certain tasks that have to be fulfilled in adolescence, which used to be defined as your teenage years. And today, psychologists, sociologists are saying that adolescence stretches all the way, some say to 39. Now, historically, mythically, it was considered till 30, because at 31 came of age. Jesus began his earthly ministry at 30. Superman emerges as Man of Steel at 30. You know, most of these comic book characters are playing off their mythical, folksy Jesus Christ figures. They're really playing off the gospel. Coming of age. By 30, you ought to have grown into yourself. If you haven't, then something has gone awry in the process, a little before, a little after, but somewhere around 30. Society ought to be able to depend on you to be a building block and not a brick thrown through the window. All right? By 30, somebody ought to be to ask you, so what's going on with you? And you have something positive to say. All right? Would you all agree with that? All right. So what are the tasks of adolescence? I'm glad you asked. What kind of time am I working with? Because, you know, I can stretch this. I'd be here 4 hours. I can cut it. You said go for, Brother Harris, you said 4 hours? Go for it. You said 5 minutes. I got 35 minutes? Okay. All right. Task of adolescence. The things that must be done. And along the line, start making your own lists. Have I completed that task? Because the degree to which we complete the tasks of adolescence are the degree to which we reach a point, an aspect of maturity. The degree to which we complete the task of adolescence are the degree to which we experience stability and sustainable productivity in our adult lives, or experience instability in our adult lives. So if you don't have a successful adolescence, you're going to have an unstable, unsuccessful adulthood. All right? And some of us as adults have got to intentionally reach back and complete some tasks that should have been done in adolescence, or have delayed adolescence into our adult life. All right? So this becomes a metric to measure where you are in your own individual formation. And let me say, as a son of a man who spent 44 years in prison, and a stepdaddy who went to prison, and all the drama and trauma that came out of life that me and April grew up in, we came of age late. We grew into ourselves as late, and as adults, we still had some stuff to complete. There were some gaps in the narrative because we were the products of our environment. Is that right, April? And so we've tried to provide our children with a stabler environment so they could grow into themselves much faster, not having some of the disadvantages, disruptions, and traumas that we had to experience. Environment is everything. As they say, even a good seed has trouble growing in bad soil. All right? Tupac, I like the way he put it. He says, nobody looks at a rose that grew through the cracks in the cement and says, why does it have broken petals? You admire it for the sake of its tenacity, because you can look at the broken petals and say, man, they got some broken petals, but you got to give credit for the fact that most roses can't grow through the cracks in cement. So growing up in Hilltop back in the day, I'm a rose that grew through the crack in the cement. I may have a few broken petals, but you try to get through the cement first. All right, now, adolescence. What are the tasks of adolescence? Things that must be done for us to come of age so that we can be that Man of Steel, or Simba and reclaim Pride Rock, or Mulan and save the nation from an invasion. One, identity formation. Who are you? Somebody say, who am I? I hope you're struggling with that question. Who are you? And the question is, do you have a healthy or a pseudo sense of identity? Now, they're saying that this past week that Snoop Dogg was with Kobe doing something. Now, last year he was Snoop Lion. Before that he was Snoop Dogg. All I know is he's a part of a genre of music that dumped a lot of toxic waste into the minds of a generation, and he got rich messing up other people, and then don't let his kids listen to his own music because he knows it's garbage. If you won't feed it to your own kids, you know it's garbage. So he's gotten rich, destroying the people he say he's proud of. And yes, I agree, take off the Snoop, take off the line, he is a dog. And rich don't make you not a dog. All right? So what's his identity? Who is this man? Can I see his birth certificate? Because I know it don't say Snoop or Lion. That's a pseudo identity. Shaq is a pseudo identity. Those are pseudo. Who are you? And the crowd can't give you an identity. Your stage name, Jay-Z, that ain't who he is. That ain't who he is. Air Jordan, that ain't who he is. He can't jump no more. Does he know who he is? He way beneath the rim now. Who are you? I ain't talking about your rep in the fraternity, the sorority, all that. That's fluff. That's persona. Who are you? A healthy sense of identity. That's what Simba's issue was. When you see the son of a Lion King hanging out with a meerkat and a weasel, a meerkat and a warthog, singing Kuna Matata, eating bugs, when he's supposed to be ripping away at the canvases of antelope, and he eating bugs. That is a Lion King who does not know who he is. And the company we keep is very telling on whether or not we have a authentic, a healthy, or a pseudo sense of identity. Because birds of a feather flock together. Everybody around you is stupid. Guess how you acting? If the police is looking for everybody you ride with, you probably go end up in trouble. Who are you? Do you have a healthy or a pseudo sense of identity? Are you an eagle who hangs out with turkeys? They're both birds, but just some can't fly. It's sad to see eagle hanging out with turkeys. Turkeys are raised for slaughter. Eagles are symbols of valor and peace. They fly at altitudes other birds can't go. There's a whole lot of eagles hanging out with turkeys. All right. Identity formation. Who are you? Clark Kent had to figure out who he was. He knew intuitively he was different from everybody. Milan had to figure out who she was because her society says as a woman she couldn't do certain things. Part of figuring out who you are is having the courage and the guts to reject people's presumptions and labels and boxes and categories. That's what the judge Deborah did. Hebrew women weren't allowed to be military leaders. That's what Joan of Arc did, who at 16 years old started leading her people in a 100-year war against the English. And was a military champion, was burned at the stake by 19. One of the greatest military generals of all time. A teenage girl had more fight than 1,000 men. That's what Harriet Tubman, a diminutive 4'9" runaway slave with a gash upside her head, had more courage than the men. Half the reason why they're mad at Hillary Clinton, whether you like her politics or not, whether you think she's honest or not, is that at a time when women were in a certain role and first ladies decorated the White House, she was her husband's every bit his academic, professional, intellectual equal, and said, oh, I could have stayed home and make tea and cookies, and they got mad at her for that. But she refused their categories. You got to at least respect people who push back and say, I will not let you define me. Society will give you a pseudo identity. So each one of us have to wrestle with it. Before you can come of age, You got to have a healthy definition to who are you. And resist the temptation of your own self-imposed pseudo-identity or society's pseudo-identity. And closely tied with that is value formation. How do I believe that I should live? Everybody comes to different understanding of that. Howard Thurman says everybody's writing their life paper. Somebody say life paper. Now, y'all been to school, you're smart, you know that when you write a paper, the first thing you do is set the margins. If you set the margins too narrow, there's some things you might exclude that need to be in the paper. If you set them too wide, you'll include some stuff that'll ruin the quality of the paper. Everybody in writing your life paper, and you write it with the ink of your everyday deed and doing. Thought, word, and deed. You're writing your life paper. Today, you're adding something to that narrative. You got to be careful how wide you set the margins. You also got to be careful how narrow. Our society is going through major convulsions today because people's margins are way too narrow. As a pastor in a church, I deal with narrow-minded people all the time. But some of you have seen your friends dead and gone or in a heck of a lot of trouble because their margins were set too wide. Value formation, setting the margins. Developing basic life skills. All right? Now, these were supposed to be bullet points under C, so I just messed up typing these out in haste. Hygiene is under there. Basic life skills. I already told you, the only funk I like is P-Funk. Life skills. Just managing and stewarding your own body temple and your hair, your shoes, you know, putting some lotion on. Ash is a sin. I ain't found it in the Bible yet, but I know it's in there somewhere. It's offensive. Just hygiene. You ever meet people that they just look disheveled? Come on now. Yes, hygiene. Domestic abilities, cooking, cleaning, grocery shopping. The reason why I put grocery shopping, if you on a budget, you cannot afford to eat out all the time. You got to learn how to cook. And before you can learn how to cook, you got to learn how to shop. Because cooking is not taking something out of a cellophane bag and popping it in the microwave. That is not cooking. And you're paying way more than if you learn how to buy the ingredients and cook it from scratch. And you're getting more natural foods. That way you're not being... 80% of the sodium in your body does not come from table salt. It comes from the preservatives and pre-packaged food. So if you want to reduce your sodium, forget about the salt shaker on the table. You got to start cooking from scratch and stop doing all this prepackaged food. Learning how to shop so you can stretch your daughters. Home organization. Is your physical environment a mess? It's a basic life skill. Can you organize your environment? If your physical environment is chaotic, your thought process is chaotic. And anybody who enters your physical environment, they've entered your chaos. It's a life skill. Bring order. Genesis begins with that the Spirit of God moved upon the darkness. The darkness was the chaos, and God brought order out of dark. The first thing the Holy Ghost did in creation is defined as bringing order and definition to that which is unformed, malformed, deformed, bringing order. A life skill. Can you plot me in my office and I organize it? Can you plot me in a bedroom and I organize it? Can you plot me in the kitchen and I organize it? Am I trying to cook where there's no certain place for dishes or for the salt or for the sugar? On my office, I have history books, folklore, psychology books, pastoral care books. I know where to go to look for a book because I have them in sections. Imagine just having books in no certain order. Now I'm looking for one book and I got to look through a couple of thousand books to find any one. I spend all my time searching because I have no process by which to quickly get at what I need. All right, it's a life skill to Can you organize your home, your physical environment? What does your car look like? How many of you got a car? Would you be embarrassed if we took everybody out right now and looked in the inside of your car? Good. Because if you offer somebody a ride and you get ready to open the door to your car and say, I'll walk, that means you gotta bring, it's a life skill. Organize yourself and your environment. Taking care of things. I have shoes that are 15 years old that look brand new. Why? Because I polish them when I wear them. I have a mahogany cedar shoe tree that I put them that takes the sweat out and preserves the leather. And I put them in a cloth container. I put them in the boxes, and so I don't have to. They don't bend up. The leather doesn't crack. They don't wear out. Do you take care of your clothes? Do you take care of your stuff? Do you take care of your computer? Do you throw it here or there? Do you take care of your phone? Is your screen all cracked? It ain't what you got, it's what you take care of. Do you steward the things you have? It's a life skill. You spend a whole lot of money when you don't take care of your stuff. How to get around. We used to get driver's license at 16. Are you 27, you don't have a driver's license? Why? When did you make the decision that somebody got to taxi you your whole life? People sick of you. You don't realize that? It's one thing to drive you around when you was a kid. You was a kid. Now you're grown. Folk don't want to have to reorganize their day, take you where you're supposed to be because you haven't figured out how to get around using the public transportation. It's a life skill, figuring how to get from point A to point B so you don't have to bother other people who got things to do besides worry about how to get you where you're going to be. Managing time and money. It ain't how much money you have, it's how much you can manage. Effective communication. Do you know how to effectively communicate with family, people in relationship, employers, friends? Self-discipline, developing self-discipline. Learning how to tell yourself no. At the table. Do you not tell yourself no? You ain't never going to be healthy till you learn how to tell yourself no. When you want to slap somebody, do you know how to tell yourself no? When he looks so good or she looks so good, do you know how to tell yourself no? When no is the healthy option. When that dress would look perfect on you, but you know you need to pay on the ones you already got, do you know how to tell yourself no? Self-discipline is when the discipline that's been applied on you from the outside, if you read M. Scott Peck's The Road Less Traveled, parents and others will externally apply discipline, setting boundaries and so forth for you, that you are to internalize it so that after a while you become self-disciplined. Nobody has to tell you to pick that up and clean it up because you've internalized the externally imposed discipline. It has now become an inward compulsion. That's what we call self-discipline. That is maturity. I don't have to tell you, pick that up. It's part of who you are to keep your environment orderly. Self-discipline. Learning how to tell yourself no. Setting healthy boundaries among family members, among peers, in the workplace, in social settings, on social media. Why in the world would you send pictures of yourself on the beach in the Caribbean while you're still there and let the whole world know ain't nobody at your house this week? So everybody who wants to break in knows that they got several days before you get home. I told Carissa once when she was in college, her and her friends were going on spring break up to New York City, and I said, Carissa, don't tell people about your spring break till you get back. You letting folk know they got time to rob you. Do you know the number one time for burglaries in America? Funerals. Funerals. Because people know they got several hours while you grieving a loved one to pull up a truck and rob your house of everything you got. That's how cold-hearted people are. Funerals. You got to have somebody watch your house while you go grieve the fact your mama died. So in terms of healthy boundaries, how much information are you going to give about yourself? And let me say this about fellas, since employers are looking at websites and so forth, exactly how do you want to be seen? Ladies, how scantily a picture you want to put on Facebook? And don't tell me when you put that picture on Facebook where you half naked that the brothers they don't put posts, but they personally message you after that. Yeah, we ought to get together. Come on now, brother, say amen under your breath. Don't say nothing out loud, but just think in your mind all the times you privately message somebody after you've seen a picture on there that was too provocative. Don't say amen out loud. Where should I or should I not go? That's a boundary issue. How should I dress? Argue it if you want to. You're grown. You know what you're doing. Certain dress invokes certain things. And the reason why, let me say this, because a lot of times ladies get mad. We start talking about modesty. Say we're always picking on the women. In a sense, that's so. The brothers get in trouble and things that make them look too hoodie and so forth. In our Western culture, when men want to look sexy to the females, we don't have to show flesh. We have to look successful. And we can look fit without showing our behind. Somebody decided that for women, the definition of looking good is being half naked. So we don't have to cover up because we're already covered. So until we change the definition of what it means to look beautiful to a woman in our society where it doesn't include showing half your flesh, the conversation falls on those who are showing most of their flesh. And you know when you put on that form-fitted dress, you get a different reaction than when you keep a little bit of the glory to yourself. You know when you plunge that neckline and that cleavage comes out, you get a different reaction. All right? That don't mean that the brothers are free to do whatever they want to you. No, absolutely not. It does mean you know what things you setting off. Boundary issues are, what visage do I want to provide of myself in certain environments? If I want to keep things professional on my job, how should I drop it on the job? Because you can dress in a way that would guarantee every dude in the office is going to stop by your office, by your desk, and ask if you need a pencil. You heard that in the back, didn't you, Karen? Mm-hmm. You can come to church in a way to make sure there ain't no dude within 3 pews going to be able to worship. I've seen it happen. I've been preaching certain Sundays and all of a sudden had to focus on one side of the congregation the whole rest of my sermon so I don't forget my next point. Because somebody done come to church and decided to show their glory, reveal their glory more than God's. How should I dress? How late should I call or accept a phone call? Ladies, he can call 2 o'clock in the morning, but should you answer? But you do. Should I drive my own car? Meet you there. Who do I let know where I live? Now, I heard Jessica talking about he waiting in the bushes. Isn't that what she said at the workshop earlier? Talking about somebody break up with somebody, now they're waiting in the bushes. Okay? And I know the protocols in the past, you know, make a man come pick you up and da-da-da-da-da. But ladies, let me let you in on something. You may need to date a person a while. If you live alone in an apartment, you may need to date them a while before they know where you live. You meet him at the restaurant or the club. Go with a couple of your friends. Don't fly solo. Protects you more. Got a buffer. Because stalking is big business nowadays. And that guy that you just met at the mall, you exchange numbers, you decide you're going out, now he comes to your apartment, now he know where you live. You decide, I ain't seen the right thing from him. I don't want to do this no more. Now he waiting at your house when you get home. How soon in that relationship do you want somebody to know where you live? Who do I give my cell phone number to? Who should just call the office? These are boundaries. All right? In adolescence, we have to learn how to set good boundaries. Because these things bring stability or instability into our adult life. Self-discipline is really about boundaries. Distinguishing between a healthy and an unhealthy relationship. You doing all the giving, they doing all the taking. Healthy relationships have mutuality and reciprocity. If they never reciprocate, if they got like on that commercial on TV, they got the alligator arms when the check comes. I would get it, but I can't reach it. I don't go eat with alligators. Identifying and developing my gifts and laying a vocational foundation and being unapologetically self-focused. And each of those, whether it's Milan, Superman, Simba, what are their gifts? What are their abilities? Identifying them. Superman, do you remember in Man of Steel with Superman, he was a little boy and he was hearing all those different sounds. He was going crazy because with his super hearing, he could hear everything. And his earthly mother had to teach him how to focus on what he really needed to hear. You can have all the abilities in the world that bring all kind of attention to you, but you've got to learn how to focus. Because your superpowers will overwhelm you with stimuli. And you've got to learn on focus what really matters. What do you need to get done? And so you've got to identify and then develop your gifts and lay a vocational foundation, which requires you at some point in your life to be unapologetically self-focused. Somebody say self-focused. Distinguishable from selfish. Selfish is when you get what you want at someone else's expense. Somebody's in pain because you took what you wanted for yourself at someone else's expense. That's selfish. There's a wreckage behind you for you having gotten what you wanted. Self-focus is when you invest the necessary time, effort, and resources into developing yourself so that you have something to offer others. Window of application. When I was in Colgate Rochester Divinity School, my junior year, to save money, I moved off campus and rented a room from an elderly white woman in Rochester. Her husband had died, and she needed extra income, and she also didn't want to be in the house by herself. And I had a separate entrance and everything. I rented a room from her, saved a lot of money, and she would make some food sometimes and leave it in the refrigerator for me if I wanted anything, though my food and everything was supposed to be totally separate, but just being nice. And once or twice a week, we'd sit down and have dinner together and so forth. She was a nice lady. We was cool. And I was her dark grandchild. and I got so into preparing for finals one semester that for weeks, I hadn't seen her, and I apologized and said, I'm sorry, I've been antisocial and yada, yada, yada. She says, no, you're being self-focused. She says, I have a son who's a doctor. To get through medical school, he had to be self-focused. She says, that's different from being selfish. If you don't focus on what you need to do to develop yourself, you will never be able to offer yourself for the good of others. You cannot come of age if you do not have a period in your life where you are intentionally and unapologetically self-focused. No, I couldn't be there. I had to study. No, I can't go out. I got to study. No, I can't be on this committee at church right now because I'm trying to complete this final course so I can get my master's so that I can be a physician in this community. Don't even let people in church guilt you into developing an unhealthy and unsustainable schedule that stops you and God from fulfilling the big picture. Because church work can simply be another form of addictive, compulsive behavior. Because being busy in church does not mean walking in God's will. Huh? Sometimes you got to tell church people no. And when they don't hear you, sometimes you got to tell them, Hell no. And then just say hallelujah, and it's all good. Just put hallelujah behind it, and it's all good. All right? Being self-focused. And finally, understanding my purpose. Where am I? Or why am I? Why am I here? Or to say in other words, how is my life supposed to matter to the well-being of others? That's really the question of purpose. Superman had to ask it. I'm here to be the guardian of the planet. Simba had to ask it. I'm supposed to be the king of Pride Rock. I got to take it back from Scar and the hyenas. Milan had to ask it. I'm here to save my father initially, but ultimately to save the nation from an invasion. Martin King had to ask it when he wanted to simply give lectures and be a pastor in a local church, but he was called to lead a movement. Each of you have to ask, how is your life supposed to matter to the well-being of others? Because if your life only matters to you, your life doesn't matter. Did you catch that? If your life only matters to you, your life doesn't matter. Mastering the task of adolescence is the definition of maturity. Without maturity, we can't experience stability or sustainable productivity in our adult lives. You may be talented enough to get something, but you won't be able to hold on to what you got if you have not mastered the task of adolescence, if you don't know how to set boundaries, if you don't know how to tell yourself no, if you don't know how to organize your stuff or take care of your stuff, stuff will slip through your hands like water. Coming of age requires mastering the task of task of adolescence. Now, real quickly, because our time is really out, the healthy life continuum. In her book, People Making, Virginia Satir argues that a healthy life continuum proceeds through the following sequence of stages: dependence, independence, dependability, and dependence. I covered this with you a couple of years ago. Dependence, independence, dependability, dependence. We're born in the state of dependence. We become, through adolescence, independent, learn how to take care of ourselves. We proceed to become dependable when we become parents and employees and public servants. And then if we live long enough, we return to a state of dependence. Somebody's got to take care of us again. Where are you on the continuum of life as we think about maturity, as when we move from dependence to independence and dependability? Where are you on this continuum of life in each of the following categories? Number one, the day-to-day costs of living, your mortgage, rent, utilities, insurance, food, transportation, clothing. You may be in a state of dependence. You still need the support of others to provide those things for you. Where are you in terms of professional reliability? Here's the thing to catch. You may be a 20-something living at home while your parents are still supporting you as you get ready for grad school or get an economic foundation or what have you. But that doesn't mean on your job you cannot be a productive employee that your boss and the corporation depends on. So you can be dependent economically to some degree, but you can be very dependable professionally. Where are you on the pendulum in terms of your Christian discipleship? You might be in a state of economic dependence, but that's no reason, that's not a reason why Reverend Hogan can't depend on you here in the ministry of the church. You might be in economic dependence. That's no reason why we can't, the community can't depend on you to be a reliable advocate voice for progressive causes in the community. Where are you in terms of your civic responsibility? Voting. Community service. A constructive voice. Think about what's going on in our nation right now. You got marches all over the country, led primarily by young people, trying to fight for gun reform. Young people, most of the people dying. 50% of all the homicides and gun deaths involve African-American males, most of them young. Who has more vested interest in gun reform than young black males? Dealing with police reform. Who has the vested interest in that? Where are we in that? Rights of women. Minority women are disproportionately impacted by laws and policies and allocation of resources that affect women, women's health care, women of reproductive ages. Where are we in those issues? So you may be economically dependent, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be a responsible citizen in the community, or that you shouldn't be responsible in the church. You shouldn't be responsible on your job. So when you think about the various aspects of our lives, where are you on this continuum? Are you unnecessarily in a state of dependence? Are you independent, which means you're taking care of yourself, but not necessarily doing something for somebody else? Maybe you live in an apartment, you're independent. But are you dependable? Economically, you're independent. You pay your own rent, but you don't pay your tithes and offering. So in the body of Christ, trying to provide a collective witness in the world, you're not dependable. You take care of yourself, but you're not providing a community service for others. So you're not dependable. You're independent, but you're not dependable. Maturity in adulthood is when you cross all the way over into dependable. You have to ask yourself, are you resistant to being dependable? Because with dependability comes commitment, the big C word. Do I have a problem with commitment? Do I want to be on the hook? Am I refusing to commit myself to something, to be dependable, to be reliable, because I want to be able to take off for the weekend without anybody looking for me? Or I want to be able to go out and hang out, yada, 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 yada. Ain't nobody mad at you for being young. But have you figured out yet how to be young and still be dependable? I've said this before. I'm going to leave this with you. That history changes when young people get serious about serious things while they're still young. If you remember nothing else about this, remember this. History changes when young people get serious about serious things while they're still young. People my age never lead social movements for positive change. They may lead regressive movements to go backward. Listen to what people my age and older are saying. Take our country back. They're fighting to return to some fantasized golden era in the past where they had certain privileges that they feel are threatened now. It is young people that always push society to open new doors, expand opportunities and freedoms, and build bridges. And when young people are in a daze and are not moving along the developmental continuum, are not successfully completing the task of adolescence, or have too severe a delayed adolescence and are not reaching adulthood, society suffers, because then there is nobody to demand justice. There's nobody to protect freedoms. There is nobody to raise conscious thought. There's nobody to hold the church accountable. It was young people that put the Catholic Church feet to the fire on the priest pedophile issues. It is young people that challenge this nation on excesses in war. It is young people that push the envelope on women's rights and civil rights and gay rights. Old people don't do nothing except look for a chair to sit down in, and they don't like change because they want familiarity. It is young people that God has at God's disposal to make necessary changes in society and in church and in culture. So history does not change until young people get serious about serious things while they are still young. When they come of age. SNCC, CORE, Martin King Silver, these were young people that came of age. Susan B. Anthony, these are young people that came of age. So we desperately need young people. Right here in New Beginnings, this whole SHIFT conference is about you all shifting so that you come of age. Because otherwise, our congregation and all the effort people my age and older put into starting congregation, it will fall to nothing if there's no one behind us to pick up the baton and take it to the next level. Take it places my generation can't even think of to go because it's just not in us. Now, I have some other stuff on here I'm not going to not going to deal with because I don't have time, and I was going to do a comparison contrast of baby boomers versus millennials. But the definition of millennial, because I heard you guys talking earlier in my office when I had the TV on, definition of millennial is anybody born after 1980 who reaches adulthood after the year 2000. So it's actually a long stretch. A baby boomer is somebody born somewhere between 1946, post-World War II, and 1964. I was born 1961 on the end of the baby boomers. Generation X and Y and all that afterward. But millennials are people who became adults sometime after the year 2000, so they're going to start splitting that out because that's now becoming a long period of time. Right? And they suggest that, Virginia Satir suggests that baby boomers reached a state of dependability earlier than millennials, but that's because of the way in which we were raised. I don't have time to get into all that. Let me stop here in case there's a question or two on this in terms of coming of age. Anybody? I get scared when I have a room full of millennials and ain't nobody got nothing to say. Because I'm raising a couple of millennials and they always got something to say. Any questions that you all have about this whole subject of coming of age and moving through the life continuum, that dependability, independence, or dependence, independence, dependability, and then if you live long enough, dependence, that moving from completing the task of adolescence into adulthood and maturity. Does that even make sense to you? Does it challenge you at points? Do you all have unfinished adolescent business? I found out as a young adult, I had a lot of unfinished adolescent business.
So I guess my question would be, if I was to ask about my coming to age, being that I am an 80s baby, I feel that humanity plays a big role in how we come to age. Would you agree?
That's such a big term. I don't know what you mean by it. How humanity, break that down in other words. It's like somebody coming in my office saying we're having communication problems. That is so big. They got to drill down so I know exactly what they're talking about.
Sometimes I feel like the newer generation doesn't have the same upbringings or morals. Our values are not being taught like they were to us. And I feel that that sometimes causes a lack in the communication that we have with our younger generation.
That's some of what Virginia Satir gets into. She contrasts things that, baby boomers develop more life skills earlier and so forth. But that's because of the way that we were raised. Among baby boomers, most families had 5+ children. We had 5, and that was considered a small family in a community where the Boyds had 11 and the Wallers had 13. And, back in the time where birth control just came out, and people had as many babies as, they say, the Lord sent. And so today, families are having 2 kids. And so back in the day, most kids today, they got their own room. Chris and Sam had their own room. I was in my mid-20s before I had my own room, because when I went to college, I had a roommate. When I went to graduate school, I had a roommate. And so me and my brother were shoved up in the room when we lived with my grandparents. It was me and my brothers and my uncles and Felicia, Abe, and Heather. Everybody had to share something. Didn't nobody have nothing of their own. We didn't even have chicken, except on Sundays we could have your own piece. So, and that had to do with poverty and things like that. And so when you have larger families, you're sharing, you have to take care of one another. Everyone, we had, you came home from school and you had to do your homework, do your chores. And we had chores then. Kids, they didn't grow up doing chores. We had to take care of one another. You had to share. You had to take your school clothes off and put on your play clothes, which was last year's school clothes. The short pants you wore in the summer, you didn't buy them as short pants. It was cut off the jeans when they wore off at the knee. So you learned how to take care of stuff. And so we were raised differently. So you develop certain skills. And so the sense of working together, sharing, all of those were life skills we developed earlier. But we also developed some pathologies. What happens in this house stays in this house. That was a formula for a lot of abuse going undetected. Now the kids that are raised today, you know, stranger danger, see something, say something. So there's more accountabilities. So when you compare and contrast the two, yes, there are some hallmarks because of the way we were raised, but there's also some good things, some better things for millennials who are far more open-minded. Try to get people my age to rethink something. It's like dealing with granite. Young people today are far more open-minded, generally speaking. They have access to more information. They've been raised in a more, they're more open to a more diverse crowd of friends. They're, in many instances, better problem solvers. So I've learned to look at this more where there's upsides and downsides of each generation. Yeah. Anyone
Pastor,
else?
I got
Yes.
a question.
Yes, sir.
That was deep. This is deep. So with kind of like the baby boomers kind of being considered like the oven-baked generation and the millennials being considered like the microwave generation where they looking for instant gratification, would you say there's any successful way for a millennial to skip a stage on the life continuum?
My generation had to learn to use the microwave. Okay. Some of them thought everything different was of the devil. They say the baby boomers, we experienced more change than any other generation of human beings from the beginning of the world. Because we started off with telephones, one attached to the wall, and had to go through cell phones and pagers and car phones, internet, MySpace, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I mean, the world has changed so much. It's been a whirlwind of change. You guys, I remember when cable TV first came on, because TV used to go off. And they sang the Star Spangled Banner, didn't come on until 7 o'clock in the morning. Now you guys don't know nothing about that. You guys don't know nothing about play clothes and all that other kind of stuff. And we had layaway where you had to earn the money and they take it off the rack, but you didn't take it home till you paid for it. Now you put down credit cards and yada, 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 yada. And so it is one of the things that my generation had to do is learn the benefits of some of this new technology to speed things up. Now, one of the things millennials have to do is learn the benefit of cooking from scratch. Everything can't happen fast. You don't become a friend with a click of a mouse. Don't fool yourself. You don't have 700 friends. We learned in life, if you got a handful of friends that you can trust who know you and still like you, you are blessed. They're not your friends. All right? Don't you fool yourself. You can't microwave a relationship. All right? You can't meet somebody online and then fly to meet them somewhere. That's crazy. We grew up suspicious. You guys just walk right into trouble because you just trust everybody. I walk into a room, I want to know where the exits are, where the bathrooms are. Does the table tip over in case somebody starts shooting? Is it bolted to the ground? Does it tip over? You know, who's sitting around me so somebody starts shooting? Do I have somebody I can throw in front of the bullet so that I get out? I mean, I think of stuff like that. You know, I figure if anybody in the room older than me, well, you had your chance. Come on, let somebody else live a few years. So, you know, you take one for the team. I still got stuff to do. You know, I think about that. I look into a situation. Chris will say, I'm just sitting there eating. I'm looking at everything. I'm looking at everything. So, you know, it is that sense of, I think millennials have to learn how to slow down and do it the old-fashioned way. Slow down and get to know somebody. They were talking about cookies last night. Cookies can't be an early part of the relationship because guys can't focus once cookies are entered into the equation. do you love me? Well, if I have to say yes to keep getting the cookies, then yeah, well, whatever you think I need to feel about you, yes. I just really love cookies. And we really can't tell the difference to do I love you or just love the cookies? Well, I don't know, since from the very beginning of the relationship I've had the cookies. I never had to really just to deal with you. You never made me deal with you.
Oh, thank you.
Did I answer your question?
Well, listening to what you said, that you can be dependent in one area, independent in one life, and then dependable. And then his question, it just made me, I don't know if this is a question or a statement or if it's both, but I think whether you're a millennial or you're a baby boomer, I think we try so hard to put something into a box and define it so much. I don't see, and I could be wrong, because I'm looking at this. If I had to put myself, I've always been independent, but I'm on the stage of learning to be dependable. But at the same time, I'm still also being dependent. I need others around me to help me, to fuel me, my fellowship. I think that you could continuously be in all four stages of these life,
Yes.
of your life, and nothing be wrong with that, as long as you learn balance.
Yeah.
Balance in the carnal part of the world and balance in the spiritual part of the world. And I think that once you learn that, you'll learn how to master all four of these stages from the time you're born to the time you go. That's.
I think you're right, because see, things have changed. I see them saying we're running out of time, but and I see that. But things have changed in that it used to be when you graduated from high school, when we had the industrial economy, you graduate from high school, go down to the plant and get a job and go to work, buy a mortgage, send your kids to college. So at 19, you can move out and get your own apartment. And in today's world, it takes more education to have entry-level skills gainfully into the economy. Parents can't cut kids loose. I grew up among a generation where parents believed at 18, we done. You got to get out. You got to do something. You got to go to college, go in the military, da-da-da-da-da. We can't do that with our kids because it takes more to launch them. And I'm trying to deal with some of the knucklehead parents, my generation, who want to cut their kids out. Did nobody give me nothing? Well, come on. Your parents had an outhouse. I don't see you turning down indoor plumbing. Stop it. Things change. And so you're right. In the divisions are not as neat and clean now as they were then. You need support longer. And you can be in you can be in a couple of those categories. That's why you got to look at each element differently. Ain't no shame in continuing to be economically dependent if you're using it as an opportunity to be self-focused so that you have something to offer later on. The only thing you have to offer this world is you. And if you don't ever develop you, then you're going to be another underdeveloped person who doesn't have anything to offer. So take advantage of it. But that doesn't mean you have to be unreliable in all aspects of your life just because you got to continue to live with your mom or your dad or auntie or whomever, because that's giving you an opportunity to get the education you need and get started and save some money and yada, 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 yada. That don't mean you can't be reliable. You can't be a good employee. You can't put in some community service. Can't be reliable in your Christian service. So we end up being all of those things. You can be in all those stages at various times. It's the integrity of it. Yeah. Good point. Anyone else? Any last comment? Question? I celebrate it. I think that there has not been a greater need for a dynamic generation to be engaged since the civil rights generation. And I've used it before, the analogy of Martin King generation being the Abraham generation, my generation being the Isaac generation, and you guys' generation being the Jacob generation. Abraham was the father of the faith. Jacob was the father of the 12 tribes, the progenitor of the 12 tribes. Isaac was a quiet generation. My generation, the Barack Obama generation. Yes, Barack Obama's in the White House, so forth, but it's the Martin King generation that opened the doors. Our generation walked through. Now it's your generation that is fighting the battles where people are trying to set the clock back. And they're redefining the nation in legal terms. You guys have to recapture the fire. Jacob had to recapture the fire of Abraham. My generation blew it on a lot of things. And therefore, your generation has got to rediscover that fight. You may have grown up on Nintendo, But y'all got to go to war. And I'm not talking about picking up no AR-15 and hijacking a peaceful march and deflecting the real issue. I'm talking about organizing your folks to take all the tools and tactics from former years and today's years, even armed with social media. Folks in the Arab world use social media to bring down Mubarak and other despots and so forth, and to start an Arab Spring. That was young people in countries where there's 70% unemployment among young people. They've been changing the world. This generation has got to be engaged. You've got to be as radical as the Martin King generation and far better than my generation. Because unfortunately, my generation missed. We took advantages of what was given us from the previous generation, and we thought that our only commitment to the movement was to wear a few pieces of kente cloth made in Taiwan. It's made it far too easy for people to make rear assaults on hard-fought gains from yesterday. As women, they're trying to turn the clock back. As minorities, they're trying to turn the clock back. The weapons industry, the war industry is killing us. Y'all got to go to battle. Preserve your own soul and save the soul of this nation. That's your challenge. And I hope you come of age, because we need you. Give yourselves a hand.